Hey everybody, this video is designed to assist you in producing your summary of the Cochrane Review. So I'm going to go over a lot of technical details around making sure that you're able to fully comprehend and read the systematic review in a way that it can inform your summary of said systematic review. So some of the slides in here I've taken from, Professor Wieland has generously allowed me to use some of her slides. Her presentation is called How to Understand and Use Certainty of Evidence in Summarizing Information from Cochrane Reviews. And I'm going to link to her entire PowerPoint in the supplemental course materials in this module as well, so you can check that out. So the structure of a Cochrane Review is very similar to other published systematic reviews. They just tend to be a lot longer and more detailed. Some of the major differences between a published systematic review in a journal and a Cochrane Review tend to be these four items. So Cochrane Reviews tend to always include a plain language summary, which I actually really like. So it makes the review very accessible to a non-medical audience, or an audience that might not be as steeped in the lingo and the jargon as folks who are working in that field. And it's again in an effort of really spreading scientific knowledge to the general public. It's also helpful for practitioners in the field who might have not kept up or who are not on top of some of the medical lingo anymore because of more of an emphasis on practice rather than the theory and the research behind it. Cochrane Reviews also have include detailed tables for each article that was included in the study, not just for a summary. You see that very frequently in published systematic reviews, sort of a summary table of all the different studies. And of course, with the meta-analysis, you might see the forest plots for that too. But Cochrane Reviews also provide a table for each article, not just for the entirety of the articles included in the review. Cochrane Reviews tend to also include more detail about the inclusion-exclusion process, including lists of articles that were included and excluded. So that's always kind of interesting to look at. And last but not least, I think a big difference between sort of static systematic reviews published in journals and Cochrane Reviews have to do with the fact that Cochrane Reviews are regularly updated as more evidence becomes available. And at times you might have a review that's already been updated 3 or 4 times. So the hierarchy of evidence in evidence-based medicine places systematic reviews of randomized trials at the very top. I've already alluded to that in the previous video, so this shouldn't be any news to you. And many of you, of course, are already familiar with this, so I'm not telling you anything dramatically new. Now, Cochrane systematic reviews deserve a spot even above regular other systematic reviews and meta-analyses, because of the attention to detail, the breadth, and of course the constant updating. So the next slides, I will give you a quick overview over Cochrane's way to grade, to evaluate the evidence of a systematic review. And GRADE stands for Grading of Recommendation, Assessment, Development, and Evaluation. So let me tell you a little bit about GRADE. It's based on an international working group that developed the system over several years. It's been updated constantly because of continuous feedback that the group has received. So here's the definition: a formal process to rate the quality of effect estimates from systematic reviews and the strength of recommendations and guidelines, right? And so for you to understand what GRADE means and how GRADE is being used in Cochrane Reviews can really help you summarize your review more effectively. Just a little bit more about GRADE. It's used widely by very renowned and well-known institutions in medical research and healthcare, the World Health Organization, the CDC, Kaiser Permanente, and so on and so on and so on. And again, Cochrane uses the GRADE principles to evaluate the quality of certainty of the evidence for the outcomes included in Cochrane systematic reviews. And I think that's a real key term: the quality of or certainty of the evidence. So how certain can this systematic review tell me that, thinking back to the example from the previous video, that vitamin C reduces the incidence, duration, and severity of the common cold when used in a particular way, right? So how certain is the evidence based on all these reviews that were systematized in the systematic reviews, can the authors give me a clear idea of that? And they will, and there are certain ratings for this level, for this the quality of certainty of the evidence, which I will go into next. So the overall quality of evidence about the estimate of effect has a lot to do with a level of confidence that the estimate of effect is close to the true effect, right? So it actually has an impact. So grade is outcome-centric, which I think makes it a valuable tool in using it in systematic reviews in the medical field. So let's look at some of the way that you will encounter some of this language in systematic reviews. Reviewers will write about high, moderate, low, and very low levels of certainty of evidence, right? And so basically the confidence in the effect is evaluated in those terms, and the quality of the evidence is similarly assessed with high, moderate, low, and very low, right? So for evidence from randomized trials in systematic review, the quality of evidence is lowered each time there's serious concern about 5 categories. And I'm going to tell you what they are, because those are going to be important for you to look for the kind of language, the kind of way the reviewers are writing, the writers in the review are writing about it as you produce in your summary. And so here are those 5 categories, and I'm going to go into a little bit detail on each of those. Risk of bias, inconsistency, indirectness, imprecision, publication bias. Some of these should sound familiar to you from some of the readings for the day if you've done them already. If not, you'll encounter them again. And if you already are familiar with systematic reviews, this will be no news to you. So let's look at some of the more specific information on each of those 5 components. So risk of bias basically means that there's some problems with how the studies were conducted. For example, randomization wasn't carried out properly. Participants might have been aware of the intervention they're receiving, right? That lowers the quality of the effect, or the quality of how the effect is measured, the intervention is measured. Or if large numbers of participants drop out of the trial. So those are things to look for in terms of risk of bias. Because it might skew the results of a particular randomized controlled trial into one direction or the other. Inconsistency. Now, inconsistency is variation or heterogeneity. There's a big jargony word for you. So basically, inconsistency is variation between the results of the individual studies in a meta-analysis. So if there's a lot of variation between individual studies, this makes it less likely to say something certain about the effect of the meta-analysis, right? Because the differences are just too huge. And so, for example, sources of heterogeneity, or of that variation, right? So heterogeneity, variation. I'm going to put this here because sometimes it's easier to remember what it is in plain language, in plain English. Clinical characteristics. So if there's too many variations between the patients, the interventions, the outcomes, methodological characteristics, randomization, statistical, and so on. So if that is true, and if that is happening in some of the studies included in the systematic review, that might lower the certainty. And the authors will clearly write about this in their results and analysis section. And by authors, I mean the authors of the systematic review. The third component, indirectness, basically refers to the available evidence not directly addressing the review questions, right? So available studies might include populations, interventions, comparators, or outcomes that do not fully address the review question or are limited in some important way. So there isn't a direct connection between what the review set out to find out and what is in the studies. Imprecision is the 4th category, and imprecision refers to when the amount of available information and or the range of possible values leads to lack of precision about the estimate of effect. That's a little technical here. But again, I just want you to be aware of imprecision. If you find that language in the review, you'll know where to go back to. And the PowerPoint presentation by Professor Wieland has a couple more slides on each of these. But I didn't want to include them because I'm trying to keep this this module as short as possible already, and it's fairly lengthy already. And the last one, publication bias, is probably the easiest one I find to understand. So publication bias is when the results of available studies are systematically different from the results of unavailable studies, right? And this is often to do with the fact that journals tend to skew towards studies with a positive outcome, or where the positive meaning where the tested hypothesis was actually found to be true rather than a quote-unquote unsuccessful trial, right? So positive studies are more likely to be published. So if the available studies are not a representative sample of all existing studies, the effect estimate might be biased, and that's what we call publication bias. So places to look for where the systematic review authors are providing language around low levels of evidence is, for example, in the abstract. And here's an example. You see the circles around passages where the authors have evaluated the level of evidence as being low or very low and so on. So those are places in the abstract already under main results. You'll find that information that can then guide your further reading. And I'm going to talk in a few slides about a good strategy to use as you're approaching the summary of your review and how to go about finding some of the information you need to include. So just hold on for 1 second. Just want to show you these examples very quickly. Here's another example of a plain language summary, and even the first sentence on the quality of the evidence says clearly, overall the evidence quality ranged from moderate to very low as assessed by grade. And if you think back to the slide, it's going to take me too long to go back to it, but where it gave us those 4 ratings: high, very high, high, low, and very low, I believe it was, or moderate might be something in there. But there's 4 of them. That's basically what you're looking for in this, what is highlighted here. So, how to read a Cochrane review for your summary? I'm sure you already looked at it, you selected it a while ago. So I would suggest to read the abstract and plain language summary first. Then read in the following order these sections: the background, discussion, author's conclusions. And then I would look at the template provided by Professor Wieland again and see if you can already fill some of the information in. And probably you'll have some information already that she suggests to you where to include in those paragraphs. If you're missing information, you feel you need some more specific examples, then look into the results sections for greater detail. But let the information that you found in these sections here guide you going into this section, because there's a lot of information there. And I want to make this as effective for you. I want to make your writing process as streamlined and effective as possible for you. So I want to take a look at a couple of sections from the sample review by Professor Wieland that I've included in the required section. So I think you should take a look at it and read the review by her. It's very quick. You don't have to read the entire Cochrane review that she is summarizing, because that will be, that will take a long time. But I included it in required reading. I think I said it's also in the module description, because I want you to at least, maybe you can glance at it and compare and contrast if you want, but you don't have to read the whole thing. Just wanted to include it there. So here Professor Wieland writes about, however, the reviewers considered the results of the review to be of low or very low certainty, meaning that the observed effects may be different from the true effects. This judgment was based on problems with the conduct of most of the trials, such as the lack of blinding, participants, and outcome assessors. So right here she gives some support for that statement. And we're going to look at a slide in just a second about some of the language about maybe, may, or may, probably, and so on. So keep that in mind. But this comes directly from a passage in the abstract of the review, where it says, across all studies, risk of bias scores indicated several domains at high or unclear risk, most notably allocation concealment, blinding of participants, and outcome assessment, effective reporting. We downgraded the quality of evidence largely due to the serious study limitations, inconsistency, and imprecision. Right? So this was really across all studies. This is something that, it's easy to find right there in the abstract. So you don't even have to go into actual article. You can already write a substantial part of your review, of your summary of the review. So here is a slide that I really like, and then I'm going to show you another example from Professor Wieland's summary where she applies some of this language. So this is a table about how to word results, and actually Cochrane Review authors use this for their wording. So I want you to understand what it means, because it's some of the wording you can use in your summaries as well. So for example, and the way to read this table is, so let's say You have high quality evidence for benefit that is of clinically substantial size, where the intervention improves outcomes. It is an important benefit. You can absolutely say something about, you can use the intervention improves outcomes, right? If the benefit is a little smaller, you would maybe say improve slightly. If there's no benefit, there is little or no difference in outcome, right? So improves slightly, little or no difference. So it kind of goes from left to right. It's downgraded. The same as from top to bottom. So let's say you have evidence of moderate quality. So you would say, but it's an important benefit. You might say probably improves. If there's less important benefit, probably improves slightly, and so on. So depending on where you fall, here and here, this is where you end up in terms of your language. Okay? And then if there's very low quality evidence, it is across. It doesn't matter what the level is on the importance of the benefit. It is always very uncertain. So again, it is a formulaic approach to the language about wording results, and for you to word the writing of the results found in a Cochrane summary that can be really helpful and understand what some of these hedging words, slightly, probably, little, may improve, and so on, what they mean, because they stand for particular levels of evidence. So here's the example from Professor Wieland's summary. Although the certainty of the evidence was low, the reviewers identified several specific interventions that had moderate to large benefits for reducing pain or distress, and suggested that the potential benefits of these interventions justify their use in clinical practice. So here's where she took that from. The quality of trials and from the abstract again. The quality of trials and overall evidence remains low to very low, underscore the need for improved methodological rigor and trial reporting. Despite low quality evidence, the potential benefits, and so on, right, what she says. And there's another part in the author's conclusions where it says something similar. The findings of this review support the efficacy of distraction hypnosis combined CBT and breathing interventions for reducing children's needle-related pain and distress, despite very low to low quality evidence across psychological interventions. The potentially desirable outcomes and values of reduced pain and distress will provide justification for their use in clinical practice, right? Which is exactly what Professor Wieland is summarizing here. So you get the same information that informs this particular summary from different places as well. So good luck with your summaries. It's a draft. Remember, you're going to rewrite it again for your portfolio, and if you're interested in getting it published, Professor Wieland and I will continue working with you on it after the class ends. So, as with all effective writing, it will go through several revisions. So good luck with that.